has really cut deep, I believe. It's created, or it's generated so much friction from people that fall into the category of the Cultural Heritage Act, which is anybody over 1,100 square metres. Fortunately, the Act has been repealed. It'd have to go down in history as the shortest Act that's ever been enacted, five weeks. And you've got to question what a government is doing, passing acts that basically are unlawful.
Masonic filth!
The other thing I'd like to make very clear, apart from welcoming everybody here, is that I want to make it clear that this meeting is not about an attack on the Aboriginal community. It is about an attack on our freehold title rights. And I think it's really important that we differentiate the two. Today, Rural Action Movement, just briefly, it's been around for a long time. It started in the early 90s when we had interest rates that you couldn't hold over. We were shooting sheep. We had a few droughts, the price of wool collapsed, and the grain price collapsed as well. And I don't know whether people, there's farmers amongst you that would remember that period, but it was no picnic. Rural Action Movement was born out of that. It was very successful in its early years, and then it lost its way. I took over the Rural Action Movement 10 years ago. I dropped some grain on Parliament House just around the back here. But apart from a bit of notoriety, I don't think I really achieved anything. So I took the Rural Action Movement into a sort of mothball situation and redefined the Rural Action Movement so that if you become a member, then you would receive benefit from it. So that's the Rural Action Movement. The reason that Rod and I called the meeting today was, at the time, everything to do with the Cultural Heritage Act. As far as we were concerned, it was unlawful. It impacted on another act that exists, the Transfer of Land Act 1893, and it essentially the Cultural Heritage Act was unlawful against that act. And the Transfer of Land Act 1893 overrules Cultural Heritage Act every day of the week. So when we called the meeting, that act was still alive. When it was repealed, I spoke to Rod and we decided that we would continue with this meeting. In organising the meeting, I have a number of contacts in the media world. The ABC, who, in the bush, they're our main broadcaster, and we listen to them intently and believe everything they say. But anyway, no luck there. None of my contacts were interested. GWN, Channel 7. I really pushed hard to get some airplay. I was afraid that today there'd be just a handful of people turned up. However, I think we could all give ourselves a round of applause because a lot of you have made an effort, and I congratulate you for doing that. I'll wind up fairly quickly, but the reason Rural Action Movement has called this meeting is because in the aftermath of the Act, I don't know what the politicians behind me think is a fair thing, but an Act that lasts 5 weeks, there need to be some accountability for what went on. And the Rural Action Movement is seeking some scalps. It would like the resignation. Let me tell you who it is first. The resignation of John Quigley. John Quigley should never have allowed this to get into the Parliament to start with. That is his bloody job, and he hasn't done it. As far as I'm concerned, get rid of him, and that's something that Premier Cook must look at doing. He's embarrassed the Labor government and also the Liberals and the Nationals and anybody else that voted for the Cultural Heritage Act back in in 2021. So he's the first one. He's got to go. He's not doing his job. The second one, of course, is Booty, Minister for Aboriginal Affairs and a few other things. I don't care. He's probably a good bloke and all that, but he has got to go. The third thing... The third thing that Rural Action Movement wants is an inquiry into the Solicitor General's office. It used to be called the Crown Law Department. They got this really wrong. You know, it shouldn't take a couple of hicks from the bush. And there's a group of us, Rodney, myself and other members of our group, that stumbled across section 58, 63 and 68 of the Transfer of Land Act 1893. They are our freehold title rights. They're enshrined in legislation and they are sacrosanct. And as far as I'm concerned, the Crown Law Department are not, the Solicitor General are not doing their job. They're another lot. The separation of powers is incumbent on the Crown Law Department / Solicitor General's office to keep that separation alive and well. I don't know what went on. We have a government that has total power. They have both houses of Parliament in their control, and if the Crown Law Department said to them, you can't pass this act, it's unlawful, and they've turned around and said, you can go and get stuffed, we'll do what we like. If that's happened, we need to know, and we need an inquiry to establish that something like that went on. So I'm not happy about the way that our government is behaving. It's a slight on our great state, WA. We are a really good group of people. West Australians do things really well. And what we do not want is a government in here making unlawful laws and acts. We do not want that. So that's why Rural Action Movement has stood up. I didn't want to do this. I had a meeting in Esperance. I tried to get the message across to WAF, PGA, National Party, Liberal Party. They didn't get it. And it had to come out publicly as it has. Rod and I got together. We both live in the Esperance area. And we are here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. So the Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Act, they will tell you very proudly it took them 5 years. 5 years to create this piece of legislation. They weren't organised when they launched it. There were no larks. There was nothing set up. 5 years it took them. Imagine the amount of money they spent on it. I know the head of Department of Planning, when I met him at Albany at the information session, he told me this piece of legislation was going to cost $28 million a year to manage. Are the taxpayers happy with our money being spent like that? No. Me either. So our next speaker is Rita Mavaleskas. She is an affected member of the public. She is a bank warrior and she's also a criminologist. Rita?
Hello everyone. This is a last minute thing, so I'm going to do my best, but it's very important that I get this message over to you all. I just want to welcome anyone from any of the Indigenous groups that have been affected by what I'm about to say, because I think that they are innocent parties in this as well. Now, 5 years ago, in June 2015, the state government signed an ALUA. An ALUA is an Indigenous Land User Agreement, and it was signed with 6 Indigenous groups over an area in WA that's north of Jurien, east to Merredin and south down to Hopetown. Now, this agreement, in exchange for $50 million a year for 12 years, a payment of $50 million each year for 12 years to the Indigenous groups, which is made up of convoluted contracts, agreements, deeds and things that people aren't supposed to uncover, is in exchange for the Noongar people will agree to A, surrender of native title rights and interests in respect of the settlement area, and to validation of all acts historically may have been done invalidly in relation to the settlement area. For instance, our properties. The government's selling us our properties which were native title. So they've got these 6 Noongar groups to release any liability to the government. The government's going to pay them. They've set up a trust. They've transferred 121 properties from across that area. One significant prominent large block on a prominent street in Applecross. Land areas in Noangara, Ravensthorpe, Albany, Mandurah, Coburn, you name it. They would have been put into a trust to earn the money to pay them. Now, this was done, the heritage law was done as a promise because the Noongar people were worried about the protection of their cultural sites. So this rubbish law that was supposed to be put in place to damage all of us and affect all of us, the government promised to look after those cultural sites, albeit the government under the original Heritage Act of 1972 under Section 18 has been blowing up and destroying heritage sites since 1972 with ministerial approval. But you were going to have to pay to put a shovel in the ground to stick a tomato plant in. So in relation to all of this, what the government has also done is put I think it's blanket. You're all going to have to check your own interest reports against your property through Landgate. I've checked several. They have applied a native title interest to all properties in this area in 2021. And at the same time, they extinguished it because of the agreement. This is done 6 years later. Now, if you all go to Landgate, as well as getting your Crown title, get your interest report, which they charge you $65. It will have a native title restriction on there, interest, which has been lifted. That's unacceptable. This is retrospectively 6 years later. Now, through this agreement, the Southwest Aboriginal Land and Sea Council Corporation, who has a record of all native title interests, novated their rights to the Central Services Corporation within this agreement, handing over all native title documents, maps, any information that the government could get their hands on. So the way that I see it is the Indigenous people will not have the freedom to spend this money. The government will dictate what they need to do with it. They'll have to put it into educational groups, community groups. The government will take a huge amount of fees and charges. The trustee has perpetual as the trustee. It's set up through securitisation just like all of our homes. It's a money grab. It's just for profits. That's all it is at our detriment. That's why the law was put in place. So the law is unlawful, and you now have a native title interest on your property which shouldn't be there, because when you buy a property under fee simple, that distinguishes native title. So how can someone have a native title interest under their property title at Landgate? So that's the reason why the law was put in place. It was to harm everybody, and it's unacceptable. So, thank you.
How lucky are we here in WA to have such amazing people with a wealth of knowledge. These are also the knowledge holders that are sharing the information with us. But along with them sharing their information, we have an individual right, we have an individual obligation, a moral obligation to stand up for ourselves. So I just want to say it's great to see everybody here today. We weren't sure how many people were coming, but thank you very, very much. Our next speaker is somebody that most people here definitely know. He has a huge presence. He is the Vice President of the Royal Action Movement. He is a Commonwealth officer, and he is the founder of the Great Australia Party, Rod Culleton.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and first of all, I must say, wow-wee, look at the presents. I've got goosebumps already, and I'm not doing it live, so it's not ad lib. First of all, I just want to make it very clear, this is the start. From small things, big things grow. And I wanted to start this in Western Australia because I am a proud Western Australian. I stand here as a Commonwealth officer that represented you in 2016, although it wasn't the Commonwealth Parliament, it was the Australian Parliament, but I did take the correct contract to the Triple Crown, and that is what I will remain. And of course, another Commonwealth officer stands beside me, ratifies my work, and that is Len Harris, and I'm very pleased that he's been able to join us today. So here's your second witness. Okay, as we all know, a nation falls on the lack of knowledge, and I've really tried my best against the headwinds and the adverse media reports, who I do respect journalists, but a lot of the times they do ramp it up. But they have a job to do, and they also are Australians, but they are one-sided. They all are for what's behind me here. And I must also say what's behind me here is actually the Little League. It's not the league, you know, it's not the AFL where we play at the top level, and that's why 12 senators get elected out of this state to make sure that we go to a Commonwealth High Court of Parliament to hold these jokers to account, and that has not been happening because none of the other 11 senators in 2016 wanted to go anywhere near me. It was that bad I changed my brand of deodorant. Anyway, let's get into it, and I've written this is very important because this is the first announcement to go further for what we need to do as a nation to reclaim our rights. We were certainly, Greg and myself, down at Katanning, and I want to make it very clear, the West Australian Farmers Federation, Pastors and Graziers Association, and the Nationals and the Liberals all sat down at Katanning with Little Proud, who does the country Little Proud, I might add. But they all sat down there and tried to invoke motions so that everyone would become subject to this hideous act, which of course hasn't passed the royal assent, which we'll get to. So it was no act at all, and that's why it's done it. It didn't do a backflip, it didn't exist. But the more important thing is, both Greg and I got up and opposed all the motions simply because it was un-Australian. So we managed. Anyway, they all got out on the front of Parliament, and the media came along and said, look at the heroes. They were holding up the motions that were all dismissed by, well, largely dismissed by Greg and myself. And then guess what? They get the accolade. But you know what? The Nationals, the bloody Liberal Party, and everyone that stood on that step voted for this bloody hideous act. Okay, so here it is. And I hope everyone's got my notice on Cole Blanche too. Okay. So what we have here, I've titled Trespass and Suppression of Our Common Rights. 50-year legacy of Labor governments and 50-year conspiracy by the Liberal governments and others. To all my fellows Commonwealth Nationals, I better put my glasses on now. As a fully sworn qualified Commonwealth officer of the Crown of the United Kingdom, Northern Ireland and Scotland, I make this announcement today on the steps of our Parliament. I did notice the other day a police officer, or yesterday, said, did we have a licence? I said, we don't require a licence. We pay the overheads for this place, and we have every right to be here. I make this announcement today on the steps of our Parliament as notice to various organisations that masquerade as authorities to govern and adjudicate the academic, economic, health, religious, political and legal affairs of Australians that began with the removal of our great Commonwealth granted to Jewish Federation on 1 January 1901 by the Whitlam government, removed by stealth in 1973. The Parliament behind me is financially supported by the people of Western Australia, and all those who claim to serve us merely are public servants paid by the taxpayers' purse, giving us the right to hold them to law pursuant to Clause 5, Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act 1900, the founding deeds of this great nation. On the commencement of the British Act, being the Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act 1900, the Commonwealth as a body politic came into being and the 6 colonies became the 6 states of Australia, bound to that law, establishing the Commonwealth Parliament comprising the Queen, a House of Representatives, the Senate and the Executive Council, to which both Len and I contracted under oath to become duly sworn Commonwealth officers under forementioned Crown. This unlawful act of the Whitlam government under Labor occurred 50 years ago, to which no jubilee is set this year to occur for this event, as it is not recognised at law, thus reverting the state, Western Australia back to a colony. The reason you elect 12 senators out of every state and 2 out of every territory is for those people to attend under contract to the United Kingdom Crown to sit under the licence in the High Court of Federal Parliament to oversee the regulation of federal and state legislature, which we're here today to do, and oversight an executive government and adjudicature being the courts of the state of Western Australia. This oversight is to make sure your rights are protected through constitutional guarantees at law, being a federal protection of the Crown of the United Kingdom and no other. In 1900 at Federation, the government was a servant class with the limitations set in the Constitution, being the title deeds to this country, to whereby this all changed in 1973, as stated earlier, and later through the implementation of the Australia Act 1986 UK by the states. The importance of this event today is such that the people must pay attention to the 2 dedicated Commonwealth officers who stand before you here today on the steps of your Parliament under their continued sworn constitutional duties and responsibilities to give confidence for you to reclaim and exercise those rights granted to you by your and our forefathers at Federation in 1901. What is a right? The Commonwealth is a right. Justice is your right. Property rights, money is your right, self-autonomy is your right, and free speech in a democratic society is definitely your right. I reiterate, for the lack of knowledge, a nation falls, and as such, I, along with others, and my great team, Darren, Dixon, petition, that are here with me today, and Len Harris, have, by example, been showing the people of Australia our law through the eyes of a Commonwealth officer by live streaming on social media and doing these very basic, these interviews. We as Commonwealth nationals, have not been given notice for the removal of our authority. This is the Commonwealth that runs the authority of the people under the constant guardianship of Crown law, where we recognise as a free people with common rights under sovereign being God. This ought to be reflected and registered on the minds of every man and woman on the land of Australia. Will concern us for our value and standards on how we will live our lives as free people or as people under servitude to the moneyed power which may consider us as property for security collateral to loans advanced to Australia, a corporation that's not a body politic, Commonwealth of Australia, established 1900. The performance of law. As a Commonwealth officer, there is a principle of law at the judicature level that we ought to be aware of that defines us and how we ought to decide our choices in following a mandate. It's found in the royal law of the Bible and supported by the ancient maxims of law which state, "He who obeys at the command is the servant." Why this principle is of great importance is that the loss of our common rights being dictated by persons doing business as premiers of a state This principle includes the right to a government that derives its authority from us, that extends to many and other rights over our body and our children, food security, our property, begins when we follow the mandates of others seeking to impose their will for whatever reason over us. For the state of Western Australia to exist, it must do so under the binding law of the Commonwealth. Due to the effects of federation, the Commonwealth is generally regarded as the more powerful partner, which removed all prior borders and placed them 12 miles out to sea, allowing West Australians as a matter of right to safely return home through the pandemic to the western side of our one self-governing colony unfettered, as McGowan was mistaken in claiming a border existed in the jurisdiction of South Australia, some 100 metres from the political limitation, of course, which exists at the 129 Meridian line, resulting in almost all cases being dropped by the police prosecutors for want of prosecution under the Crown.
And they put people in jail!
And that's a fact. Protection of our rights. I'm nearly done. It reminds me of my maiden speech, actually. There's a principle to give careful consideration in regard which states he who fails to assert his rights has none. Simply, you cannot sit on your rights. And today is where we start to exercise our rights. Publicly, we must be mindful to protect our rights for ourselves as well as others. That includes our children and their children in the same manner and spirit that those have fought that very end in the past. For example, in our law under the Crown, we may have the courts observe and apply the principle of law. It's against equity for free men not to have free disposal of their own property. You would pay attention to the words free disposal as being without interference, affect the indefeasibility of your rights from any other, such as the current West Australian Parliament have attempted to do with the most recent Aboriginal Culture Heritage Act of 2021, and now the effects of the Electronic Conveyancing Act 2014, which has not received royal assent pursuant to Section 2.3 Constitution Act 1889 WA in order to become binding law. In other words, Landgate, get your hands off our true titles. Under a Parliament, under the standard of the Crown of the United Kingdom, these acts and all acts placed 1986 would be held unlawful and invalid, as acts must comply with the contracting of the office of legislature, which we're here today, taken by oath or affirmation, for parliamentaries to actually sit, represent and lawfully serve us, the people. Both the Liberal and Nationals voted for the Agriculture Heritage Act, and through the West Australian Farmers Federation supported motions to have extended to all property owners, which I'm reiterating and mentioned earlier, which was circumvented by myself and Greg Kenny of Rural Action Movement. The Labor government dismissed the proposed act within weeks after being put on prior notice on the 30th of June 2023 due to not being able to receive royal assent nor to become law. This act was revoked on unprecedented terms on the good efforts of my fellow and all you fellow people going to Landgate. The people's power. For the first time in human history, the people with landholding rights came together to decide the form of government that they wanted. And that decision was honoured by the Crown through its Parliament at Westminster. So that power of the people would be enshrined into law, where that community would be a body politic known as the Commonwealth of Australia. Let me say it with legal focus that we Australians are the masters called the Commonwealth above and over the servant to be known as the government of the Commonwealth. Under the law of the Constitution, the government serves us. The Parliament makes laws to our advantage and protection.
I know all the rules over me!
The Parliament representing the authority of the people has no authority to limit our authority and therefore cannot limit our freedoms. We have of late witnessed a number of West Australians, and I'm very proud here, exercising their rights to their Crown titles, despite being told at Landgate that the banks have destroyed them and burnt them under instructions.
Lying bastards!
That is larceny to permanently deprive. This certificate of title records true property ownership in English. And even if your name has not been entered on that certificate of title, it should be.
Where we can understand.
Being in possession of your property is 9/10 of the law. The fact is the current state government has no jurisdiction over Crown titles and is in violation to 2.2 Constitution Act 1889, devoid of the Queen of the United Kingdom and her other realms. The importance of this law cannot be understated, and it manifests the importance of the critical event of 1973, where a government and a parliament that was the Commonwealth by nature and under the Crown of the United Kingdom, Northern Ireland and Scotland, in accord with the Constitution, introduced 1900, ceased to exist to be usurped and replaced with a government and parliament under invented and pretended authority and alternative office of the Queen named Queen of Australia, which has been accepted as a general acceptance and a truism to date. In order for the constitutionally valid Queen had to be sidelined and substituted with a new crown, which had to be invented, and that crown did not previously exist in the law of the Queen's 21-year reign, a crown known as the Crown of Australia. If one examines the foundation law of our Commonwealth, one would not only notice that the Crown of Australia does not exist, but the Commonwealth of Australia exists with the protection of the Crown exclusively. We may wonder, where did this change occur in law? For that is how a government and our parliament must operate. That change in law has never occurred. In fact, the current federal regime, needing a legal document to operate, has been operating without a constitution since 1973, which marks 2023 as the 50th year of this pretended Australia under the attempted authority, Jubilee, under the attempted authority of the Government of Australia. Simply put, if the Constitution be observed, there has been no Commonwealth law since the removal of the People's Authority by substitution of the Commonwealth in 1973, which also happened here within the states in 1986. Contempt of either of the Constitution, the sovereign of the Parliament, or the Commonwealth is a serious crime, and federal governments and the members of the Australian Parliament are in breach of all the three conditions of contempt that may amount to sedition, and that's why we're here putting them on notice. I attempted to expose this Parliament in 2016 and was quickly and brutally evicted under false pretences. This current illegal establishment wielded their substantial political power to shield themselves from exposure and accountability at all costs. But the overarching power that they attempt to harness is that of the electorate, and there is no mechanism at the moment to bypass the need for election in order to hold a parliament, and in that need is where our power lies. Our problem is one which rests on awareness by greater electorate, which is simply the lack of awareness of this hoodwinking of the Australian people when the government acting in place of a legitimate government pretended to be legitimate. In winding up, once enough of us understand this situation of a government pretending to operate under the law of the Commonwealth, the body of the people that is in us, there will be change. But we have to hit that mass awareness in order for the media to present the real issues to the broadcast. It's their silence to the issues that give this government cover. When McGowan claimed to have sold Landgate, he couldn't, as it wasn't the government's right to sell the land registry, to which the Crown itself can outsell. Education will be our saving event, so attending today as a first step in sharing this message is critical, important, before the pretended federal parliament shuts down the opportunities down by the passage of legislation to suppress our right to share, communicate this very basic right. Should this legislation be passed and upheld by the courts, we're a short step away from full dictatorship by those who would have the control of government. I have met with the highest constitutional professors earlier this year who I asked a simple question: are we operating under the law of the Commonwealth? Their answer was no. It is clear the Emperor has no clothes, or in layman terms, the Scotsman has no bag or pipe under his kilt. I ask that all of you now serve a copy of my notice, 8th of August 2023, on Cole Blanche, the Commissioner of Police, and every person in this Parliament, and sign a petition for the lack of knowledge, as I reiterate Proverb 11:1:4, a nation falls for the lack of understanding, but more importantly, where there is no lawful legislator, the people fall. And may we say, God save the King, because nothing will save the federal and state governments. Thank you.
Can I just say something? Is that really the best applause that we can give this amazing man?
John Drake, this is his Commonwealth that actually tried to rob us from. And I'm standing with you because in the 1600s, John Drake was the first Commonwealth. Okay?
And we stand with you.
We stand together as one. Thank you. Thank you. We stand. Thank you. Now, in terms of Landgate, everybody probably saw Rod's video. Now, a lot of people rush down to Landgate to try and get their titles. What I've just been told is they are now charging $134.50 an hour for the search. I received a text this morning, a person's been quoted $1,100. I've just been told by somebody else they've actually received a quote of $2,000. They are gouging the people that they are meant to work for. Shame on them. Shame. Now the next thing. So Rod mentioned the miscommunication and disinformation bill. It is essential that we all exercise our right to speak. You have until August the 20th to go to infrastructure.gov.au or search ACMA on the internet and put your submission in, make your voice heard, okay? It's really important we don't just gather and disappear and that's it. We have to really take a stand on every single avenue that we can. Landgate, I was told, have brought in a team of psychologists to assist their workers because they're under stress. They're under stress. So, our next speaker is Len Harris. He's a Commonwealth officer and he's got some amazing things to share. Again, sharing his wealth of knowledge with us. So let's give a massive round of applause for Len Harris.
G'day from North Queensland. And thank you for welcoming me to Western Australia. Now, I come at this whole thing slightly different. I support absolutely and infinitely everything that Rod said. I'm actually going to give you some of the reasons why he is correct. Okay. Most people know of the Constitution. How many of you know that it is 1,006 pages long? That's it. And all the markings that you see on that, that was where I used this document in the Senate to argue for our rights.
Well done. Well done.
So, how do we know where we're going if we don't know where we came from? It's one thing to even suspect where we're going to go, but we know where we came from. These two documents that I hold here are exact replicas of Ferguson Bowen's instructions when Queen Victoria proclaimed Queensland to come into existence. Now, why is that significant here in Western Australia? It is actually in this document. Queen Victoria instructed Ferguson Bowen to set up the Legislative Council, the Upper Council, and the one that no one talks about, the actual Executive Council. So that was her first instruction. Then totally separate, and I'll paraphrase the words a little bit, Queen Victoria directed Sir Ferguson Bowen. She said, "You are empowered with the power of the Crown." Now the Crown there, as Rod told you, the Crown is the United Kingdom Crown, the Irish Crown, and the Scottish Crown. That makes up the power of the British government. So Queen Victoria empowered the governor only to actually disseminate land of the Crown, totally separate from what happens behind here. So the people in this building have no power or jurisdiction over your property. It says so here. So how does that affect Western Australia? Well, it's quite unique. After ordering Ferguson Bowen to actually create folios, employ people to make entries in those folios, he was empowered to dispose wasteland of the Crown, but only after the land had been surveyed, it had been given a lot number, it had to be sold at public auction, and the transfer of the title did not occur until the purchaser paid for the land. That still didn't transfer the land to the purchaser. It only transferred when the actual officer made the entry in the folio. Well, I've never seen a folio that looks like a computer. So all land transactions throughout the whole of Australia are under the same order that Her Majesty gave to Ferguson Bowen, because she said something quite unique. And all governors to take note, because the governors before haven't been instructed how to dispose of land of the Crown. So how are the governments getting around this? Very, very simple. They created a tenure called freehold. Freehold does not exist in the Westminster land titles. What you hold is you hold your property, and the important word is in fee simple. I've been told this morning some states are dropping the in off. Now, in is an adjective. It is a doing word. So if you're not in your fee simple title, you've got nothing. So be very careful when you're asking for anything to donate that sets out that you own your property. Okay? It has to be in fee simple. So then how do they transfer what is your right to contract with the Crown? Because the Governor of Western Australia is the representative of the Crown, not the Parliament. Very, very important. So, how did they get around? They created, as I said before, a fictitious title called freehold. And when you go to your REI, now here will be REI-WA, right, the organisation of all of local governments, they have a contract that you sign when you're purchasing your property. And in two places within that document, it asks the same question. The first one is, are you purchasing a leased property? Well, in some people in the rural areas will, yes. Or are you purchasing a freehold property? And you know, the moment you put the tick in the freehold, you have just put yourself under the control of them behind us. What Rod and I, well, I've made a commitment to actually produce a document to revoke all known contracts or even implied contracts in relation to freehold. You do not hold your property as freehold. And the reason is, going back to the proclamation by Queen Victoria, when you purchase land of the Crown, the rights of the disponor, which is the Crown, travel 100% to the disponee, which is us, the purchasers, save for those that are actually listed on the title deed under the deed of grant. So in actuality, your title deeds are two documents. Your certificate of title, which is your title deed, and you also need a copy of the deed of grant to know what the Crown has reserved. Now the Crown reserves that for all of us because it's normally minerals, coal, petroleum, and the royalties from that are supposed to come to here behind us and be spent in your interests, okay? What has actually happened in 2012, Barry O'Farrell brought into existence an act in New South Wales which is called the Electronic Lodgement Act, passed through New South Wales. He then took that to a COAG meeting. Now, how many people know about COAG? Hands up that know? Ooh, that's good. That's good. Now, everybody will know COAG is, as the spelling says, Coalition of Australian Governments. It wasn't the Parliament members who created that. It was only the premiers of every state. They created a boys' club called COAG. From COAG, every premier, without consulting their premiers, now this occurred in between 2012 and 2013. Barry O'Farrell took his act, his New South Wales Act, to COAG. By 2013, every premier had agreed that their state would opt, in other words, would actually take the New South Wales Act as their way of transferring land. So what the premiers did, without consulting any of the constituents or the people of the Commonwealth, they transferred the right and control of land use, which was never ever handed over to the Commonwealth Government, they transferred it over to the Commonwealth Government through COAG and what is now known as the National Cabinet. Yes. Yes, it's absolute fraud. So, Western Australia cannot alter that act because it has to be 75% of all of the states agreeing. So the act, the Western Australia process that transfers land in Western Australia, the Western Australian government can't change. It is absolutely ludicrous. Yeah. Now, so what's the significance of your title deeds? Well, the best way to explain that is an issue a friend of mine in Queensland, her parents were living in East, or what became East Germany, the Russian sector, and her mother actually, and father, with her as a child, somehow or other got out of East Germany and took her title deed with her to their property. They had to abandon it. Right? Anita actually had that title deed, kept it, looked after it. After the Berlin Wall came down and Germany was reunified, she then contacted the German government, and actually the government had to pay her the value of her parents' property, right? In 2007, they had to pay her the price of that property because she held the deed. This is how important it is for each one of us and our children and their children. If they do not have a Crown certificate of title with the lion and the unicorn on the top of it, you have nothing, and neither do your descendants. Now, local councils and the Western Australian government. The Western Australian government is actually listed on the New York economic website for trading, right? So the Western Australian government, in doing that, has actually placed themselves as a corporation. Every one of your local councils are all corporations, right? I had a dig into the Commonwealth Corporation Act, and it's another one a little bit like native title, where the Commonwealth government doesn't have the actual constitutional power to do that, so they bring an act on and then force all of the states to mirror it. The interesting thing about the Corporation Act is they go to the length of actually determining who is a federal person, and a federal person is a person who is employed by the Commonwealth government or a government under the Constitution. So anyone who works for local government, state government, or the federal government are all federal entities, federal people. So then it does something equally as unique. Then it actually determines who is a private person. So a private person, the definition that's real simple, is not a federal person. Then it goes on to say that a corporation, this is in the regulations, took me a long time to find this, a corporation cannot place a fee or a tax on a private person. Corporation Act, right? I can't give you the Commonwealth one, but have a look at your state one. It's in the regulations. It's Part 8, 3, A and B. It's there. So your local council cannot place a fee or a tax on your property. Go get them.
Which we already know.
Now, the clangor of them all. And I had a copy of this morning and I can't find it. My laptop, ugh, not good. The Voice. What is behind The Voice? Right? What is behind The Voice is a document called UNDRIP. It's the Declaration of I'm having an old-timers. The Declaration of Indigenous Peoples, plural, right? Between section 25 and 32 of that document, so write it down. If you're looking for it, do a search for UNDRIP.org. So the United Nations is an organisation. Okay. In that, sections 25 through to 30 through 32 tells us that the Indigenous people are entitled to the total restoration of the lands that have been confiscated. I'll let you go and read it, right? Now, I'm not saying, right, that the Indigenous people of Australia should not be cared for. They are Australian, we are Australian, as we just read. There should not be one law for one and a different law for the rest of us.
We stand together.
Yes, absolutely. So have a look at DRIP. Originally it was DDRIP. It is now the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. It was actually John Howard sent Senator Darren to Geneva to endorse Australia's adoption of DRIP. So it looks like I've run out of time and I haven't got anywhere near what I wanted to tell you. But remember, that's your constitution, not the piddly one that they put out, and our rights and privileges are all in there. Thank you. Hang on, sorry. To tell you what the problem is, we need to tell you what the resolution is. And I'm just going to read this, right. This is a petition to His Majesty King Charles III, maintenance of the Commonwealth of Australia, and it is the second prayer. Rod has already had the first prayer in. Haven't got time to tell you the structure of that. The prayer of the assigned below do request His Majesty's ministers prepare the instrument empowering His Majesty Charles III by the grace of God, King of this realm and of all other realms and territories, head of the Commonwealth, defender of the faith. 1. Declare the office of Governor-General of the Commonwealth of Australia vacant and appoint a representative for that purpose. Declare the office of Governors in all states of the Commonwealth of Australia vacant and appoint representatives to that purpose. Declare the position of Chief Justice of every state and territory and other judges appointed under Chapter 3 of the Constitution positions vacant and instruct the Governor-General, this is the new Governor-General, to appoint governors to each state. Declare any person who has sworn or affirmed allegiance to the Queen of Australia be ineligible for public office. 5, declare any person who so swore or affirmed allegiance to the Queen of Australia unable to sit as members of the House of Representatives or the Senate of the Commonwealth of Australia due to being in contravention of what? Yes, swearing allegiance to a foreign entity. And number 6 is God save the Queen. As Rod said earlier on, may well God save the King. Sorry, it is the King. Nothing will save the federal government or them in there. The rest of it I'll put on the pod up on the silent majority.
Well done.
Thank you, Len. As we can see, there's a wealth of information and knowledge, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. So do make the effort to learn a lot more. Knowledge is power. So our next speaker is Neil Pinchinen. He is an advisor to Rod Culleton, so please make him welcome.
And I have only 100 copies of the petition. I'll ask everyone who takes one not to sign it here today. Take it home and photocopy a few more, then sign it. Rod will put up on the Gap and the Australian National site where to return the sheets. We have to get 100,000 signatures, and that will be a guarantee that the petition will be debated in the House of Commons in England.
Thank you all. I just want to give a short speech about my input with this journey that Rod and I and Darren Dixon is on. And my input is to observe what has been happening as a matter of a pattern and where it's going to. My journey began in 1973 when I was doing high school law, and Constitution was part of it. And we learnt how the country operates under an authority. And what I didn't know at the time is the Commonwealth of Australia is actually the legal term for its people. It's not the Crown, it's its people. And it became the Commonwealth because the several colonies that united in 1900 represents the people in those various districts. And it's the people through landholding that decided the new form of government, which was a first in human history. So now we had the perfect type of government like a republic, where we were the authority. And the Constitution spelled out the terms and conditions for the servant, being the government. And in 73, I learnt how they operate, but in 73, Gough Whitlam changed that. And what's concerning is there was no announcement that they removed our authority. And in doing to remove the Commonwealth, they had to remove the Queen of the United Kingdom because in our foundation law, she was bound to maintain our Commonwealth and be a protector. And the protection for the Crown of the United Kingdom is under a standard, and that standard is the Holy Bible. And at Joshua 1:8, you will find that the Bible is the book of law. And that's what protects us. And they've removed that so they can shift the goalposts. Now, when I came to do some research, and in 2004 I obtained a copy of a decision that I requested, where is the authority for that law that they created the Queen of Australia, which was a new title. And they came back truthfully and they said they had searched for it, and this is the Prime Minister and Cabinet, you know, the department that is responsible for the Royal Styles and Titles Act. And they said, we can't find that authority to pass this law. And so therefore they don't have the permission under the Constitution to make that. Now, why this is compelling is because this fraud of removing the correct office of the Queen and substituting a new pretended office that has no authority, they now are making all their appointments under this so-called Queen or office. And then they brought the states in under that in 1986. And what is a pattern here is that the Labor government introduced it in 73 under Whitlam, and there was a Labor government in the states with the Labor government hawk that removed it from all the states, so now our courts have no Crown standard, and we cannot get back our rights because those courts and those governments and the new laws aren't there for us, it's there for them. And the pattern that's happening, if you examine it carefully, like when they're removing your body autonomy, so you can't decide what medical choices you may wish. You can't take control of your children because they pass laws on what they must do, and that includes vaccinations. You can't have rights to your land, which is what's happening now. Soon, the Labor government in Canberra is going to remove your ability to free thinking and speech, and they're going to penalise social media that allows what they class as non-information. So, the latest part of this trend, I wish to give you an example of what happened to me this year. Last year, the Legal Practice Board that controls lawyers came to prosecute me for practicing to be a lawyer. And yet a lawyer includes a student of law, which I started in 1973 and continued ever since. So I am a lawyer in the generic sense. But they prosecuted me because I was assisting an investigation for a company of people, clients who are misusing their property, and we sought compensation. So their lawyer complained to their practice board, which complained to the practice board here, and these people took me to court. Now that's no big deal, but there is a big deal that follows, and it's this. I was the person who filed and researched information to put into London so that we could restore our Commonwealth and have a judicial review on the Supreme Court that was stopping Rod and I prosecuting Shane Elliott of the ANZ Bank. And what the Chief Justice did was prevent us from examining the law under which they are running the judicature of the court, which is a fundamental right. So they came up with their bogus decision, and we took that to London under a judicial review, which the Supreme Court Act of England allows in the High Court. Now, I put in quite a substantial amount of information that they couldn't get around to show that our Commonwealth had been usurped. And they spent over a year reviewing that case, ready for a decision. Eventually, they tossed it out saying, oh, service wasn't executed properly on the defendants here. And that was bogus. But they had to avoid the outcome that the government of the United Kingdom aren't doing their job in advising the Queen of the United Kingdom to maintain our Commonwealth. So the government of the United Kingdom are on the hook. So when they were prosecuting me and I brought all of that material to the Legal Practice Board that controls lawyers here, they didn't respond. I asked them to respond several times. Is there a problem? Is there an error? Is there a misunderstanding in my documents? They wouldn't get involved. Went back to court and I told the magistrate, I've given them documents on jurisdiction and they won't respond. And the magistrate says, is that true? And sheepishly, Mr. Colella looked down and said, under his breath, I believe so. And he was ordered to respond to my documents, and they fashioned up some rubbish in 7 days and served that. I didn't bother responding because they had to bring in my documents on what they were responding to. And they didn't do that at the trial, where we were supposed to examine the jurisdiction law of that court and whether the Legal Practice Board, acting under the Legal Professions Act of 2008, was actually following the law, because this Act never received royal assent. And the Legal Practice Board, in charge of the lawyers in WA, are breaking the law by acting under a law that is prohibited by the Constitution at section 2.3. And the words are, and it shall be of no effect if the bill did not receive royal assent. And that prohibition is mandatory on everyone without waiver. And yet the government and the court and the Legal Practice Board are disregarding that prohibition and following through with acts that have no authority because they were never assented under the Crown since 1986. So the outcome of it is they convicted me, but the alarming part of convicting me was they ran a trial where the previous magistrate put in a plea of no jurisdiction, so that had to be heard first before a defence. And what the Deputy Chief Magistrate Elizabeth Woods did was enter a plea of guilty in for me, so I had no right to a defence and I could not enter up any documents because I was taken to be guilty before the trial. That is the pattern where we're going, and we should be alarmed and take note of what we're doing here, and especially this notice to Col Blanche. He has to be held to account because the police are prosecuting people illegally. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Who here is feeling a little bit more empowered to stand up for our rights after today? No, that doesn't sound very exciting at all. Certainly not a group of warriors. Who here is ready to stand up for all of our rights? A little bit more like it. We are not Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal. We are all Australian. And we have a fantastic next speaker by the name of Darren Dixon. He is an advisor to GAP and he is also the founder of Constitutional Watch. Let's give him a massive round of applause.
Greetings to all. Firstly, I'd like to pay my respects to each and every one of you here today. I want to pay my respects to the blacks, to the whites, to the yellow and to the brown, because together we are one. There should be no segregation. Now, what I want to talk to you about today is a treaty, a long-forgotten treaty from 1975. It's the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. And this has been ratified into Australian law through the Racial Discrimination Act in 1975. And it says the following things, and you must listen carefully, because this is in conflict with the voice, and it is in conflict with what the governments are doing in this country at the moment. They are trying to tell you that you are racist if you do not vote for the voice. They are racist because they bring this division between everybody. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights proclaims that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights, and that everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms set out there, without distinction of any kind, in particular to race, colour or national origin. What does the voice do? The voice does the opposite of that. In the convention, the terms racial discrimination mean any distinction, exclusion, restriction or preference based on race, colour, descent or national or ethnic origin, which has the purpose or effect of nullifying or impairing the recognition, enjoyment or exercise on an equal footing of human rights and fundamental freedoms in any political, economic, social, cultural or any other field of public life. It also goes on to say that special measures taken for the sole purpose of securing adequate advancements of certain racial or ethnic groups or individuals requiring such protection as may be necessary in order to ensure such groups or individuals equal enjoyment or exercise of human rights and fundamental freedoms shall not be deemed racial discrimination, provided, however, that such measures do not as a consequence lead to the maintenance of separate rights for different racial groups. This is what the voice brings. It brings separate rights to different racial groups. Each state party undertakes not to sponsor, defend or support racial discrimination by any persons or organisations. This is what is occurring now. Each state party shall take effective measures to review government, national and local policies and to amend, rescind or nullify any laws and regulations which have the effect of creating or perpetuating racial discrimination wherever it exists. The government have an obligation to take out Section 51(26) of the Constitution, which says that you can write special laws for different races. Each state party undertakes to encourage, where appropriate, integrationalist multicultural organisations and movements and other means of eliminating barriers between races and to discourage anything which tends to strengthen racial division. Racial division is what the voice will bring. Article 3 goes on to say state parties particularly condemn racial segregation and apartheid and undertake to prevent, prohibit and eradicate all practices of this nature in territories under their jurisdiction. The government has that obligation and they are working in the opposite way. State parties are to condemn all propaganda and all organisations which are based on ideas or theories of superiority of one race or group of persons of one colour or ethnic origin, or which attempt to justify or promote racial hatred and discrimination in any form, and undertake to adopt immediate and positive measures designated to eradicate all incitement to or acts of such discrimination, and to this end, with due regard to the principles embodied in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. They shall declare an offence punishable by local law and dissemination of ideas based on racial superiority or hatred, incitement to racial discrimination, as well as all acts of violence or incitement to such acts against any race or any group of persons or another colour or ethnic origin, and also the provision of any assistance to racist activities, including the financing thereof. The financing thereof. The Heritage Bill had nothing to do with heritage. It was to finance and to impose a tax on every Australian and everyone in Western Australia, and this was going to go on in every state. Each state party, the government, shall not permit public authorities or public institutions, national or local, to promote or incite racial discrimination. Yet this is where we find ourselves at the moment. You are being told you are a racist, and it is the government bringing that division. You need to stand up. You need to speak to your neighbours. You need to let everybody know that a vote in the positive will change this great nation forever. All races should walk together. Walk together now. Don't let the government create division between us. We live in a multicultural society. There is no other option but for us to walk as one. Black, white, yellow and brown. We need to unite. A vote for the voices, a vote for division and discrimination. Let's walk together as one to create a unified Australia and not a nation divided. I love you all.
Thank you, Darren, Dixon. So I urge everybody to go online and actually print out the full copy of the Uluru Statement of the Heart. Some of the information we've heard today, like one in particular, is Section 3 about the United Nations. But you need to go on and you need to print out the whole document. It's about 26 pages long, and it's mind-blowing, to be honest. So the overwhelming message of today is we are united as one as Australian, and we will not be divided by state or federal government. We are stronger than them, and we have the right, because this is our parliament. Now, to finish off today's assembly, and again, thank you all for coming, I'd like Rod Culleton to close off today. And a massive round of applause for all of our speakers.
Okay, thank you. I just want to thank everyone for taking the time to come today, show your support. What a great turnout. But now the remedy, and I'll just touch on what Senator Len Harris had said, and that is we will put up the petition. We need 100,000 signatures, because if it ain't right here, it definitely ain't right down there. And this is a separation of power, or powers. And you cannot take away that both Len and I are Commonwealth officers. We took a contract to the Constitution under Section 42, although there was a different contract put in place for us. We did not accept that because my Odgers manual, which is in my case there, is how this country runs. And Len and I have been very focused. We don't have to be in there to do the job. We can continue to do it because we have not revoked that appointment. So the remedy is simply this. Sign the petition, sponsor the notice that went into Cole Blanche on the 8th of August, and you sign it down below the sponsor of Len. So down on the thing, email it through to him, put it on every parliamentarian, let's call for their contract, let's make sure that this joint's in jurisdiction because the law says otherwise, and you have a great day. And we can do this, people, because we are the Commonwealth.
Please join me, all of the speakers, and I would personally like to say a huge thank you, and I'm sure everyone here would as well. So can everyone give a massive round of applause to our magnificent speakers? And I'd like to say particularly Rod Culleton, who, started the Great Australian Party and has been fighting for our rights. I became a lawyer and loved constitutional law and had no idea what Rod was even talking about. And that's the level of brainwashing that's happened in our nation for years and years and years. And we need to find out and learn much more, and this is just the beginning today. We're going to be organising more events to help Australian people to understand very quickly. So a big round of applause for Rod Culleton. So you might have seen me holding this book, Red Over Black. Lots of people probably know about it, but something that shocked me was that the United Nations, this is page 8, the United Nations today must be regarded as the most successful international communist front organisation ever established. And I really encourage every person to go onto the freedom of speech, the website where we can say what we think. But we have to really fight now and realise that this nation has been brainwashed for a long time. This book was published in 1982, and it is about the communist plot to take over Australia. And it's just a shock to me, and a lovely lady lent it to me a few weeks ago, and I'm just constantly just going, what? Everyone needs to understand that a lot of things are going on right now in our nation, and if we want the future to be what our forefathers fought and died for, 2 wars and many more, they fought so that this nation can be free. And we're just going to sing again, together we are one. And can everyone put their whole oomph into it so that we really send this message? I don't have to sing the whole song, the ABC plays it all the time. Our ABC, our taxpayers' ABC. And on that note, I'd just like to say that my husband rang up the ABC in Perth to say that the vaccinations, fraudulently known as vaccinations, they're not tested. And she said, oh, that's a lie. That's not true. Well, there's some misinformation for you right there, Albanese. Okay, here we go. We are one, but we are many, and from all the lands on earth we come. We share a dream, and we sing with one voice. I am, you are, we are Australia. Let's sing it again. We are one, but we are many, and from all the lands on earth we come. We share a dream, and we sing with one voice. I am, you are, we are Australian. I am, you are, we are Australian.